The Grammys have been generating quite a bit of controversy with some of their performances. One that I criticized depicted riots where a rapper performed a song. His name is Lil Baby. It showed the police as bad guys, the rioters effectively as good guys. And an activist came out joining the set apparently saying, we don't need allies, we need accomplices. It was effectively a pro-Black Lives Matter riot message. Now, I'm not one for cancel culture. It's their free speech. If they want to put out BS, I'll be here to counter it. And if you like it, you can watch it. But it still led to many people questioning the choices. For one thing, this Tamika Mallory activist has been accused of being an anti-Semite by the New York Times. And it caused a lot of controversy for the Women's March, for which she was a founder, because people heard some pretty crazy stories about her. I don't necessarily trust the mainstream press, so maybe it's not true. But she did come out and say, we need accomplices. Next, we saw Cardi B's performance of WAP. And many people were like, dude, who wants to watch this overly sexualized award program? I mean, it's just not something we want our kids or families to be watching. And maybe that's a contributor. The Grammys ratings are in the gutter. But I don't think this is a get woke, go broke necessarily. It may be a get broke, go woke kind of thing, where the Grammys knew they were failing. They knew they were facing some serious problems with ad revenue or interest. So they tried to make a show as shocking as possible in an effort to generate press. But I have an honest question. When it comes to this Cardi B stuff, what family wants their kids to actually watch this like hypersexualized behavior on TV? I mean, look, it's one thing what we've had in the past. Scantily clad women jumping around, and maybe that crossed the line for a lot of families so they wouldn't watch. But WAP takes it a step further. I got to be completely honest. Plus the depiction of riots. How many suburban or middle Americans are like, I like my kids watching this stuff? Many of them probably said, I'm not interested. More importantly, outside of any of the criticism and the controversy, I think we may just be seeing a fragmentation of American mainstream culture. Award shows are not doing well, and it's because nobody cares. We have the opportunity to watch or listen to whatever we want these days. It used to be that the Grammys came on and it was a big cultural moment. It was what was on and everybody decided to watch it. It would get massive ratings and make massive money. Now everything seems to be breaking apart. And with this fragmenting of culture, there is a desperate attempt from the establishment to create this kind of monoculture, get everybody back into the same narrative. The only problem is they're overly woke and apply too many double standards, which is causing problems. Who wants to be involved in an authoritarian culture where there are haves and have-nots based on which ideology you believe? So a lot of people are going to say, not interested, I'm not going to watch. And this doesn't bode well for the massive corporate machine. So let me just say with a bit of optimism, as the Grammys fails, as the wokeness fails to net them that audience they want, the good guys may be winning. Those who believe in freedom, individuality, free speech, etc., we may be actually taking ground as they lose audience. More and more people are watching shows like mine, so maybe that's where we're headed. I want to show you some of the controversy and what's going on with the ratings and the claps, but I want to make sure I point this out first and don't bury the lead. Check this out. Grammy Awards 2021 earns $80 to $82 million in national TV ad revenue. It may be that what's happening with mainstream culture is a path towards destruction. It may be that in the next few years, they do really, really bad. Maybe this time around, the ratings are getting really, really bad, but the revenue is still there. But when the advertisers look to the viewership and they say, wow, we overspent on this program, well, then there will be a delay. And then in the next year or two, ad rates will drop precipitously as nobody wants to watch this trash. First, let me just give you the straightforward view of what's happening from the New York Times. Grammy's television audience shrinks to a new low. They say, the collapse of awards show ratings continues. Viewership for Sunday's Grammy Awards on CBS fell to 8.8 million viewers, according to Nielsen, the television research firm. That's a new low for the show and a 53% drop compared with last year's show, which drew 18.7 million viewers. The previous low was 17 million in 2006, when Green Day won Record of the Year. 2 weeks earlier, the Golden Globes lost 62% of its audience, attracting 6.9 million viewers on NBC. Viewership for all live television events had plummeted as people have seemed less enthusiastic about watching 3-hour events packed with commercial breaks. The Super Bowl last month fell to a 15-year low in viewership. and it appears there is limited interest in a ceremony that has been scaled down because of coronavirus precautions. But unlike the Golden Globes or the most recent Emmy Awards broadcast, which had a record low in viewership, the Grammy Awards managed to avoid the use of Zoom to power the ceremony. And the show did not lack in star power, with performances by Harry Styles, Taylor Swift, Billie Eilish, Megan Thee Stallion, and Cardi B. The show at more than 3.5 hours drew praise for its production. With a mix of live performances and a small ceremony in an open-air tent outside the Staples Center in downtown LA, Trevor Noah, the show's host, likewise received warm reviews. Still, the ratings news is likely to set off alarm bells for the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and the Academy Awards broadcaster, ABC. Viewership of last year's Oscars broadcast fell to a low of 23.6 million. Nominees for this year's awards were announced Monday, and the ceremony is scheduled for April 25th. My friends, what this really is cultural collapse. We talked about it quite a bit, many of us here on YouTube. Several years ago, I mentioned that, one of the things I actually really would like to talk about and press on is the stagnation of American culture. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time a Christmas song was written? And I mean like a Christmas song that became something that we would repeat every year. Most people will say, Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. Wasn't that like the 90s or something? Maybe, I'm not entirely sure. But my question is about, we play the same songs, Jingle Bell Rock. What is that song from like the 50s? At a certain point, I started asking this question, like, wasn't that song new at some point? Why do we just keep repeating these same things every year? Why is it that we have become completely stagnant and repetitious? Movies become big smash blockbusters instead of interesting, thought-provoking movies or stories like Groundhog Day. I remember watching Groundhog Day thinking, this is a unique story. What do we get? We get derivative stories. We get Happy Death Day, and we get, Live, I Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, whatever they renamed it to. No, don't get me wrong. I'm a fan. I like those movies. They're entertaining. It's fun to play with ideas and make, new iterations of similar ideas. But we're getting movies that are adaptations, TV shows that are adaptations, remakes, Spider-Man remake every few years, Batman remake. We got another Batman remake coming. We got another Superman remake coming. The issue is people are sick of it. They're tired. They're bored. Everything's boring. What are you doing? What new video games have come out that are particularly interesting to many people right now? Sure, certainly there are some. What we are seeing, in my opinion, is an absolute fragmentation and a collapse of American culture. It has a lot to do with wokeness, in my opinion, but it has a lot to do with the internet. And I think it has a lot to do with just general cultural decay. We are not pushing new ideas. We are not experimenting with stories anymore. Nobody wants to take that economic risk. Well, I think I might, but I think a lot of people are scared. They're scared that if they press the line, if they decide, hey, we'll do something unique, they'll lose money. Certainly there are indie films and you can make them cheaper and cheaper. But mainstream culture, it's done. The unifying holiday seasons and award programs that Americans used to sit behind and watch are collapsing. Every award show collapsing. The Super Bowl collapsing. So what happens? My friends, as we talk about the culture war, one thing we often don't actually get deeply into is literal culture. We talk about how you have the woke left and you have the anti-identitarians and then you have the right and the conservatives and the populists. But when have we actually talked about the fact that in the culture war, the culture that makes up the bedrock for which we are battling on is falling apart? Now, there have been some people who decided to make new shows and new games and things like that, and I respect it. But they find smaller niche audiences, not enough to create a unifying force. There have been some TV shows that brought everyone together, say like Game of Thrones, but in the past few seasons, the show just fell to trash. Let me show you this criticism of the Grammys. And I want to keep going up, pushing this idea and then talk about the revenue and where I think we're headed. The Washington Times says, wow, this is on network TV. Raunchy Grammy Awards sparks outrage and sheds viewers. They say not even the most explicit show in Grammy Awards history could turn out the viewers. The 63rd annual awards ceremony that aired Sunday on CBS was on pace to hit a ratings low, with a time zone adjusted audience of 8.8 million. Viewership plunged despite, or maybe because of, a politically woke show that featured tributes to last year's Black Lives Matter protests and a speech from former Women's March leader Tamika Mallory, who declared, President Biden, we demand justice, equity, and policy. Justice, equity, policy. The program moved quickly from PG to NC-17, however, when rapper Cardi B did a pole dance and performed her hit song WAP by joining Megan Thee Stallion for an explicit interlude on a giant bed, a scene that for mainstream news outlets was indescribable. Quote, as a news service that must adhere to strict editorial standards, we can't tell you what WAP stands for, and we can't really say what Megan Thee Stallion and Cardi B were rapping about or simulating during their performance either, the BBC said in its coverage. Let's just say that the live TV debut performance of their X-rated hit took place on a giant bed and they did not look at all tired, the British network said. In other words, the episode went well beyond the most memorable performance of the 2003 MTV Music Video Awards when Madonna and Britney Spears kissed during a song, but it failed to spark anything resembling the same uproar. Some viewers were certainly surprised. Wow, this is on network TV, tweeted CNN senior editor Brandon Griggs. The Grammys tweeted, what a performance, with emojis and emojis of hand claps, eyeballs, and fire. Billboard magazine called it a truly wild performance. Conservatives who took note tied their comments to the entertainment industry's cancel culture. The left is fine with the disgusting performance Cardi B just gave at the Grammys, but Dr. Seuss is too dangerous for our children, tweeted Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, referring to Dr. Seuss's enterprise decision to stop selling the books. Ian Haworth, editor of the Daily Wire, tweeted, kids are now more likely to see Cardi B doing this than Dumbo, the 1941 animated film recently blocked from Disney Plus's children menu because of racial stereotypes. Let me tell you what's going on. It's called lowest common denominator culture. What do you get from Disney films like Dumbo or Dr. Seuss books? Some of them contained offensive imagery and stereotypes. I, for one, don't care all that much if they stop selling them, or if they do. If you don't like it, you can make your own things, right? But these are things that we used to tell our kids you should watch. I think it's a sign of cultural decay when we don't make new things. And that's why I'm partly critical of many on the right who are screaming about this. I'm like, it's time for something new. If you're just repeating cultures of the past, there will be nothing eventually but derivatives and hand-me-downs. At the same time, however, what we can see from the Grammys, lowest common denominator culture. Let me explain. If someone gets offended by Dr. Seuss, it doesn't matter if it is 100 people or 10 people. It must be gotten rid of. If people are offended with Dumbo, it doesn't matter. It must be gotten rid of. Now, conservatives are offended at the performance we get from Cardi B, and a very explicit performance, sure, but it's the lowest common denominator. Adult gratification, we'll call it that. They're trying to maximize how many people will watch because they know what they represent is already dead. Mainstream culture in this country is falling apart. Major news outlets' ratings are collapsing. Local news is collapsing. There seems to be this weird effect the internet has had on us where I shouldn't say it's weird, it's predictable. People are now able to watch whatever they choose to watch. So with 330 million people, you end up with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of prominent channels on YouTube and other websites they can go to get their news and their narratives. So it has completely decentralized the conversation. Now, the Grammys are completely irrelevant to anybody. After a year of being beaten over the head with insane politics, how many people are going to care to watch some weird sexualized performance from these artists or whatever you want to call them? And it's so ridiculous. It's the news we get from the New York Post. Did Cardi B fart during her Grammys WAP performance on a giant bed? What were they thinking? I'll tell you what they were thinking. They're desperately trying to shock as many people as possible and pander to the lowest common denominator, which is baser level instincts, I suppose. I remember back in, I think it was like 2004. I'm hanging out at my friend's house and we were playing, Knights of the Old Republic on, what was that? What was that, on Xbox, I think? I can't remember. And then, his buddy gets home and he's like, yo, let's watch some TV. And, referencing Knights of the Old Republic because it was a long time ago. I think it was 2004. And we put on a Family Guy, I think. I think it was Family Guy. I don't remember. And I said something like, dude, in the future, there's going to be one channel that's nothing but like The Simpsons. You can literally just like turn on The Simpsons channel. And we were all like, yeah, dude, crazy. And we laughed about it. And the reason we did was because we were looking at these cable channels where like it was playing like 3 hours of The Simpsons. I was right. Today, you can go onto Hulu and just play. How many episodes are there of The Simpsons? Hundreds? Over like 30 years? You will not be able to watch every single episode in a single day with work and food and everything. It would take you quite some time to go through every single episode. I mean, you could do it in a relatively short amount of time. But I reference that because everything has become absolutely hyper-focused. People are choosing to go to political channels where they get their literal politics said back at them. People come to a channel like mine. This one has just over 1 million subscribers, and I talk about things in a moderate perspective, but there are people who don't like me because they're staunch Trump supporters or they're just general conservatives, so they'll go to a channel like Steven Crowder. There are progressives who don't like this and won't watch it at all, even though many Trump supporters probably would watch my content. There are many on the left who will go and only watch one progressive and get their news distilled through that one individual. That's all they care about. They've developed a routine and they can watch the shows they want to watch. But this leads us to a dangerous place. You see, the culture war isn't just about whether or not one side is going to win over the other. It's not just about libertarian versus authoritarian. It's about whether or not we as a country remain cohesive and actually share something that we want to defend and protect. If you watch certain progressive YouTubers, you'll end up believing things that aren't true, but will drive you towards a left tribalist approach. And maybe you think, certainly there are things that I say that aren't true because I get things wrong. So I'm not saying that these people on the left will tell you lies. Many of them will, and many on the right will tell you lies. I think it's an exception in a rule system. Like many on the right are more likely to give you information that is factually accurate because they know you can go and watch whatever you want. And in the mainstream progressive space, because they do have establishment control, they say whatever they want because they know their audience is captive and tends not to go anywhere else. But now we're getting people who are saying, instead of watching the Grammys, I'm going to watch Tim Pool. But the people who watch Tim Pool might not watch any other channels, and you definitely should. But how much time do we really have in the day for our programs? Think about this. See, back in the day, it was The Simpsons. It was on at 7, or it was Star Trek, The Next Generation, airing on UPN at 8 p.m. or whatever when it was syndicated. I think it was a CBS show. I can't remember. Or NBC or something. It was on a bunch of channels. So at this date, at this time, you'd go home, you'd turn the TV on, and tens of millions of people would all watch the exact same thing. Maybe it's the Grammys. Then they would all go and talk about it at work. Today, people go home, and with what little time they have, there is a competition for their attention. Some will choose me, some will choose Kyle Kalinske, some will choose Styx Hexenhammer. But then their views will be shaped very specifically by a single show that they watch and not everyone else does watch. Because of this, there is no real unity. There are a lot of people who put out overt lies about me. I try to avoid talking about individuals and their channels in specific ways or accuse them of doing things publicly because, well, I don't watch every single one of Kyle Kalinski's videos. I don't watch every single one of Steven Crowder's videos. But you see, people build up this worldview based on increasingly smaller cultural factions. Where that leads us. Okay, let's talk about money. The Grammys pulls in $80 to $82 million in national TV ad revenue. That's really good for them. They'll probably do this again next year, but the revenue will probably be cut in half or more because what's going to happen is a lot of these advertisers are going to say, you didn't pull in the numbers and we took a loss. I spent X amount of dollars. I only made Y amount of dollars. The number was less than I spent, so it wasn't worth it for me. I'll tell you what, I will give you less money for the ad. There you go. The Grammys will then net less, but they'll also notice they overspent last year and they won't want to do it again. And they know the ratings for the Grammys are collapsing, so the Grammys may eventually just get canceled. What happens then? It's really interesting. While they're certainly making money today, there is something that's going to be affecting us that I think will lead this country to disillusion. And I'm not talking about civil war. I've talked about the potential for conflict and civil war quite a bit. A lot of people on the left just don't care to hear it. And not that I think it's an absolute or that I know everything, but I do think we're in a cold conflict of some sort. And that's a quote from a Princeton professor. We're fighting each other. We're at each other's throats all the time, but we're all watching different people. Even those on the right watch different people. For instance, I don't watch Ben Shapiro. Periodically, maybe. I watch Steven Crowder sometimes. I tend not to watch a whole lot of anybody. There are a lot of people who probably only watch Ben Shapiro, don't watch me. Or they watch Crowder, not Ben Shapiro. And thus they're getting different views and different opinions. The same is true for the left. Ultimately, what I see happening is while there may be an ongoing cultural conflict across the board, the collapse of a unified culture in this country, the stagnation of culture, in my opinion, will lead to a point where we no longer care to be involved with each other as a community. You'll end up seeing people in, New York watching different content specifically aimed at them and their politics and their opinions. And there are people like this in the Pacific, in the Atlantic Northeast. And their opinions are very, very different from those in other parts of the country. Instead of getting a national address, we are now seeing a president who gives let me clarify. Instead of getting an address to the nation as a whole, we get a president who gives an address to the blue states. And though the address is to everybody, no one agrees with it. You have red states saying, no, we're not going to do what you say. There's no cultural unity. So let me try and wrap this up. Otherwise, I think it's becoming too verbose. The Grammys doesn't matter to me. The Emmys, none of this matters. What matters is that the unifying culture that we had, the conversation we had, I mean, even Game of Thrones contributed to this unifying of culture. It's collapsing. People are going to watch whatever they want to watch. They're going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. It makes it harder for us to associate with others and our own neighbors. You used to be able to go to work and at the water cooler like, hey, do you see that new movie that just came out? Well, now movies are over. COVID shut down the movie industry for the most part. And now you turn on Amazon or whatever, and there's thousands of movies. So which one did you watch? Hey, did you see that movie? What's it called? It's called Spiral. Never saw it. What's that one? It's this movie. Well, okay. Not much to talk about. Not much to share. Maybe people are just going to stop watching. Ratings are down for literally everyone. So I wonder what people are really doing. Maybe there's a net positive because it's not so much that our culture will collapse, but that people will start developing new unifying cultures around new ideas. But here's my prediction. I think that as more and more people disassociate with a greater American culture, you end up with people caring less, and you end up pushing the United States towards something that very much may be a peaceful divorce. Not because of the culture war, but because we just don't care about each other anymore. Maybe economic ties will force things together, but when you combine the culture war, what happens when you get to a point where there's absolute fighting? People are, Donald Trump wins and they say, why are we going to accept this? Why would 80 million people accept a president they don't want? What happens then when someone's like, dude, we don't watch the same movies. We barely speak the same language. The woke versions of words is different from what most Americans recognize. They have their own semantics, colloquial use of words. So what happens when we're speaking a different language, watching different movies, and physically fighting with each other? The collapse of the culture. That's what I see happening. So again, we can criticize the Grammys. We can say they're dumb. We can say they're woke or whatever. It's not a get woke, go broke thing. It's an American decay thing. And I guess I could rant on this for a long time, but I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.